All right, welcome back to the shop. Do a quick preview of the parking lot. What are we working on today? Sometimes intermittent running problems are the hardest to fix. It's the bane of existence for most mechanics. Works great for the mechanic, always fails for the customer. That's usually what a customer calls, says it's got a running problem. But when you bring it into the shop, it works fine, and you can't fix something that's not broken. That's a good motto. So this customer brought the car in a year ago. I couldn't figure out what was wrong with it. Hasn't acted up, and then I did an oil change on it, and it acted up. And what went wrong, or what I suspect is wrong, is this: the ignition switch. It's an older car. It's a 2002 Acura MDX, great car. But you'd be driving along the road and all of a sudden the dash would go blank, and it was like you pulled the key out of the ignition, and you effectively did if your ignition switch has gone bad. The two things that can cause that is the master relay, which controls the fuel pump, and the computer. However, if that goes bad, the dash lights will stay on. If the ignition switch goes bad, the dash lights will go off, just like you pulled the key out of the ignition driving 55 miles an hour down the highway. And that's exactly what happens. So I've got this thing apart, and I thought I'm going to show somebody how to replace the ignition switch. It's not that hard, but I have done this a few times, so I know my way around. The ignition switch on an MDX is key operated, and it's right here in a normal fashion. You'd stick the key in and turn the car on. Just like that. We got the battery disconnected. To replace the ignition switch, this is the electrical portion, not the key lock cylinder, is this piece right here, this umbilical. This white part is the back of the switch, and these two little ears go on the back of the... I'll show you here. So on the back of the ignition switch is right here. That's this piece that I'm holding up. And this cord runs through and behind a fuse panel. It's really hard to get to. You have to take one bolt off here, and then the two tabs, pry this away, and this is the other connection. So this is one end of your ignition switch, which plugs in right, if you can see it, right in there where my middle finger is touching, and the other end has two screws right there. That's effectively and easily how you do it. But there's a couple clips behind the dash. You got to pull this panel carefully. You got to pull this panel carefully. The emergency brake panel and or the hood release panel. And then I also take off the trim around the door. So there's a few things you have to do before you can get the ignition switch out. But once you've got all that exposed, it's not too hard. The hardest part is getting this fuse panel to release and get to the back of it to get to this brown terminal right here that unplugs. That's one end of your ignition switch, and that's your other. Then you just route it through. So I hope I helped somebody with this quick, short video on how to replace an ignition switch on a 2002 Acura MDX that has an intermittent shutting off problem. There you go. Have a great day. I hope this cures your ills.